which is a working group under the UD Sustainability Task Force. My other co-chair back there is Francis Karani, who's the staff co-chair. Green Liasons, as a working group, hosts a lunch every month or so that tries to feature an environmental initiative on campus and community that you guys might not have heard of otherwise. And today we have a special Earth Month one with 2 speakers, which is awesome. And our first one is Dr. Jennifer Stewart, who got her PhD in 2011 from UG in marine bioscience. And then she did a lot of research on biofuels, and today she's going to talk about one of those biofuels because now she's a scientist at UG. And the biofuel she's going to talk about today is her work with algae. So here is Jennifer.
Yeah. Is there a clicker or just hit the button?
Oh, I can sit here and then put it forward.
So thank you for having me today. This will be a little bit non-technical and informal, so feel free to ask questions if you have them as we go along. Otherwise, I tried to keep it to about 20 minutes or so that you have time for questions at the end. So you can go to the next slide. So when you think about biofuels, there's actually several classifications of what you use as far as biomass is concerned. So the first generation biofuels were really what you think of when you think of corn ethanol. So those are actually food crops that you're using to make your fuel from. And then we had kind of gone into the second generation where you're looking at non-food sources, but often they still come from some food source. So you're thinking about cellulosic ethanol, where maybe you're taking the husks of the corn and trying to extract that and make fuels out of that. Then we had what's classified as a third generation. Originally they had lumped algae in with the second generation fuels, but since it doesn't actually compete with any land that you need to grow for for food, then you can kind of lump it into its own classification. Although the third generation, we still actually have to harvest that biomass and destroy it to make some kind of fuel. And then we also now have a fourth generation, which is classified as you don't use any arable land that you would use for your crops, but you also don't have to destroy your biomass, and I'll give you some examples of that. One is alginol. There's a company in Florida called Alginol, and what they actually use is they've engineered an algae cell to excrete ethanol, and then they harvest the ethanol from the fluid, so they don't actually have to destroy that cell. So why are we even looking at algae for biofuels? This is the statistic I like to throw up because it is so powerful. Currently, we're using about 2 to 3% of our arable land to grow dedicated terrestrial crops that we're harvesting to make into biofuels, and that's only transplanting 2 to 3% of our transportation fuels. So you can very easily do the math and figure out that if we wanted to replace a significant portion of our transportation fuels, then you would have to use almost all of the land that you need to grow food. And while you could drive your cars around, we would all be starving. Also, algae produces a lot more fuel per hectare than terrestrial crops do. They grow very rapidly. You have the ability to recycle nutrients, which is different than crops because you think about spraying all these fertilizer on your crops and a lot leaches into the land and gets lost. We can control our systems where we're recycling the water and nutrients consistently back into our algae harvesting. We also have the potential to link them to fossil fuel burning power plants, for example, and use the gases that come off those plants to supply CO2, which is where my research is actually looking at, and I'll go into that in a little bit of detail later. And if you use marine species, you can actually grow them on saltwater or brackish water, so you're saving your freshwater supply. And all of that together means we're not impacting our food security. So here's some of the policy that's really driving the work that I'm doing as far as where is our funding coming from and what is actually the focal point. There's an energy policy that mandates that U.S. transportation fuel must contain a minimum volume of renewable fuels. And I'd like to point out that on this graph here, you can see it starts in 2008 if you can't see that closely, and we're kind of like in this bar area right now. You have your corn ethanol, which is the red bars, and that has been capped. So the mandate says that only this much corn ethanol is allowed to count towards that end goal. And what everybody really put their money towards is this yellow bar, which was supposed to represent cellulosic ethanol. And basically, I think if you click, I have a little animation there, cellulosic ethanol has failed tremendously. Of the 6.6 billion gallons we were supposed to make last year, we've made 0. Even though we've invested a lot of money into the infrastructure, into this system, it has really, really failed. So those yellow bars really represent a huge kind of market opportunity for us algae biofuel people. So our primary source of funding right now is the Department of Energy, and they have set some very clear goals for us in the near-term future to get algae biofuels off the ground and into a commercial sector. So first of all, the main point is that we have to be competitive with gasoline prices. So the goal is to get our fuel that's coming out at the end of our process to be at an equivalent of about $3 per gasoline gallon equivalent. Currently, right now, we can make algae fuels. We have all the steps from the very beginning to the very end of the process ready to go, but we're making them for about $13 a gallon, and no one is going to pay that. So some of the ways that we can do that is to actually increase the productivity of your algal cells so that you get more biomass out per, let's say, acre, and that would translate into a cheaper fuel. So currently we're growing at a rate of about 13 grams per meter squared per day, and the projections are, we have goals for increasing that to 25 and 50 grams per meter squared per day to start meeting some of those cost effectiveness. And this is really where my research is headed towards. It's really looking at how do we get the biology of that algal cell to double or triple its growth rate. So there are 2 pathways, and I just wanted to review these, although the technical details are not important, to actually getting a fuel from an algal cell. The first is what people traditionally think of, which is the lipids that come from the algae. And you can extract the lipids, which is their oils or their fats, and you can chemically convert that to biodiesel. And then we have stumbled kind of across this new method, which can take the whole entire biomass and convert it to a crude algal oil. So if you go to the next slide, this is just, again, reiterating those economic bottlenecks that we're looking at. We want to increase the lipid productivity as much as we can for that lipid pathway, and we want to increase the biomass because we're using that total biomass for the hydrothermal liquefaction pathway. And I thought I had a slide on explaining what the hydrothermal liquefaction is, but I may have taken it out to save time. But basically, that's putting your wet biomass into this reactor, and you're running under extremely high pressures and temperatures and kind of doing some crazy chemistry in there. And what you get out at the other end is this crude oil fraction, this gas fraction, and then this water fraction. And the crude oil acts very similarly to crude oil, whereas you can kind of very simple upgrading techniques to drop in fuel, so you can make jet fuel, gasoline, and things like that out of it. Then we take the aqueous fraction and we would recycle that for nutrients. And then the gas fraction would be similar to methane, and so you would burn that for more energy as well. So the point here is that 74% of that $13 that I mentioned is coming just from the stage of algae farming. So everything that it takes to actually get your biomass and then harvest. And then that doesn't include anything that's downstream of processing or extraction or anything like that. So this is where the bulk of our attention is right now, is on the biology of the organism, on actually developing farming methodology for farming algae at commercial scales. So I just wanted to review some of the commercial strategies and some of the startup companies that have come out of this recently. And so the entire fuel process, like I said, there's a huge focus on capturing these carbon dioxide emissions with all of the regulations kind of being talked about even globally on CO2 emissions and greenhouse gas reductions. What we're really trying to do is take our algae and mediate that to some degree, because algae takes CO2 and sunlight and convert them into these useful chemicals. You can grow them in open ponds and some various other methods that I'll talk about in a little bit. And then you have a harvest extraction stage, a refining stage, and then you're making some kind of drop-in fuel. And that's really critical, is the government wants a drop-in fuel that we can use with our current infrastructure. And so if you create some new and fancy biofuel, that's all well and good, but then you would have to recreate all of our engines, all of our airplanes and all of our Navy equipment and everything. So they really are looking for something that we can take and just plop it into the infrastructure that we already have. Oh, and so the important note here is that recently it's been understood that the economics of this system, if you're a company in existence today and you're struggling to make cash flow, that you really can't focus 100% on fuel today. You have to have some kind of co-product to offset that extra cost. And so what we're seeing with some of our commercial companies' facilities are, just for example, this shows you the differences, like I was mentioning before, in the different types of cultivation. So Sapphire Energy is completely open pond cultivation. Algenol has these closed photobioreactors. I believe they've actually changed so that they're vertical instead of horizontal now. And then Bioprocessed Algae is up in Iowa, and they do all greenhouse cultivation in these like kind of matted algae beds. So Sapphire Energy, this is an example of that green crude that comes out of that hydrothermal liquefaction. It literally looks like a barrel of oil. They, I think, were established in 2007, 2008, and they were really selling themselves as focused 100% on algal fuels. We had a little shakeup in the industry in September and October, and like I said, everybody started realizing that they really have to start pumping out some kind of co-product to keep everything viable right now as we're working on the economics of the system. And so there's been some restructuring here, and I think they're targeting some omega-3 fatty acids and some other types of co-products to sell. I actually think they're also developing a cooking oil too, I believe. And this is a schematic of the Algenol, which is in Florida, and they are working with this cyanobacteria that they've actually engineered to excrete ethanol into the media. And then they were growing them in those closed bags so that they have a method whereas they can evaporate the ethanol off and then collect it. So it's kind of an easy, straightforward, continuous system. And they've been doing really well, although they also had a shakeup in November where we found out that their CEO quit because the board decided to go into a different direction with incorporating a lot of these co-products and decided to lay off 45% of their workforce. So it's kind of like a which way are we going to go now in the field? So what are we doing at UD in our research team to address the high cost of growing these algae? So first of all, I wanted to point out that on a commercial scale, you not only need some source of light, but you also need a carbon dioxide source. The amount in the atmosphere is not enough to support algae growth at a commercial scale to the productivity that we need to meet. So generally what people would do would buy bottles, like tanks, gas tanks of CO2, and infuse them into the algae cultures. But that is extremely expensive and can be anywhere between 35 to 50% of the total operating cost for that algae farming section. We also need to fertilize our crops the same way as you would with corn crop, where you're adding nitrogen and phosphorus. And then, of course, they can't get too hot or too cold because they're a living organism. So what we're looking at is how to optimize algae growing on flue gas. And I wanted to point out that the atmospheric content is about 0.04% right now, whereas flue gas, this was a very dirty coal-fired power plant that was operating in Indian River. I believe it's since been shut down and either reconverted to natural gas or is in the process of doing so. However, if we can tap into that supply, we can reduce that emissions to the atmosphere as well as reducing our overall cost pretty significantly. And then if you click, I think, yeah. But the one major problem is that there's other toxic gases in those emissions besides CO2. You have what's called nitric oxide, and that's very cytotoxic, so it kills almost all of the algae species that people are trying to grow. And so one of the important things is that nitric oxide is also harmful to us. It actually causes a lot of respiratory diseases and human health issues and some deaths annually as well. Contributed significantly to acid rain until a lot of it was scrubbed out, I think from the 70s and 80s, if you're, maybe you remember some of you, like the plumes of yellow smoke coming out, and now it's white. That means they've scrubbed out a lot of that nitric oxide. So we used to have an acid rain problem. It actually dumps about 27% of the nitrogen that's going into the Chesapeake Bay is from the emissions that are actually being dissolved into the waterways. And about 40% of the total NOx is from industrial burning of fossil fuels. And this heat map points out that we're sitting in this hot red zone where, as far as the EPA is concerned, we're in continual non-attainment, which means we never meet the air quality standards for nitric oxide. Not only do we get our own sources of nitric oxide, but we actually get everything from downwind states blowing in. So you can thank Kentucky for some of our nitric oxide. Okay, next slide. So this is just a little snippet of a picture. I think this was in UD Daily and the Messenger recently. So this is one of the systems that we're working with. We're looking at all closed systems because we really want to control how that carbon dioxide comes in from the power plants, and we want to make sure that it's all being used and cleaned before it comes out the other end. And this was actually engineered by engineers at the Center for Applied Energy Research at the University of Kentucky. And the organism that we're working with is called Herostigma cashewo. It is very different from a lot of the green algae that people are looking to work with as far as biofuels are concerned. And I'm looking at this because it has the unique ability to take that nitric oxide, not only to detoxify it and live in the presence of it, but to actually use that as a nitrogen source. So it can metabolize that. So we're not only looking at using a free carbon source, but now a free nitrogen source as well, which reduces the amount of nitrogen that we have to purchase. And it's also quite robust as far as you can leave it kind of sit and do its thing. It's classically a harmful algal bloom species because it blooms to such high densities that it kind of outcompetes other organisms in the water column. It creates anoxic atmospheres and things like that. And so this is just one example of some of the work that we did in the lab actually, where we said, okay, well, what if we grow these on a model flue gas? What is that going to look like? And so here's a classic picture of our algal cell, and it looks like a cornflake. And you can see that when we start to grow it on flue gas, it gets into this extremely plump cell. It's packing in as much as it can possibly pack in. And what it's actually doing, we found, which is very unique to algae, is it's really packing in all of these storage carbohydrates. So we were expecting to see a lot of lipid storage. We do get a lot of lipids, but the carbohydrate content is hugely, hugely different. And that's going to be really important in a minute. I can't remember if I took the next slide out or not. But basically, if you think about carbohydrates in a plant, everybody thinks of starch. Starch is an insoluble carbohydrate. This algal cell is actually making a soluble carbohydrate, which is a beta-1,3 glucan. And the reason that that is important is because we can easily extract that out. I can put these cells into a beaker of hot water, boiling water, all the sugars come out, and then those sugars we can easily feed into make a fermentation to convert into ethanol. And so we're starting to investigate this as an actual source of fermentable sugars for the ethanol process, in addition to biodiesel from the lipids. Next. Okay, so here's kind of a microscope image, and the yellow balls are all of their chloroplasts, which is kind of shrunken in this image. But all of these like granule looking things are all little tiny vesicles of those storage soluble carbohydrates. So we're really excited about that. And what we found was we can get them almost to 75–80% of their dry weight in those soluble carbohydrates. So that was a really recent and very exciting finding, and so we're kind of switching our direction into exploring that a lot more. And we've done a lot of work at the Arizona State University's Algae, Center for Algae Technology and Innovation Facility, which has been instrumental in some of the work that we've accomplished. Okay, and so I think I already mentioned that we're working a lot with the University of Kentucky, and they have this great system where they have a demonstration facility site out at a Duke Energy power plant. It's the East Bend power plant, and so they're actually operating on actual flue gas. So we've been working a lot together with that. This was their first iteration. Their second is much larger, and they have since just started a project in China where they're installing 3 acres of this at a power plant. So we're pretty excited about that. And you don't have to go back, but I wanted to make the point that traditionally these photobioreactors are a lot more expensive to run and to build capital expense-wise than these open pond systems. But UK has done a fantastic job at engineering, however they do, because I'm not an engineer and I don't understand any of it, to make these almost cost competitive with ponds. So that was a pretty big deal on their end. Okay, and so we're also working with a company called Algae, which is based in Meridian, Mississippi. And what they do is they actually take the algae biomass and convert it into bioplastics. And they're actually making, if you're wearing tennis shoes and you think of those foam insole parts, all of that foam part, they're actually making from algae now too. And I think they're in cahoots with, or deals with Nike and all that right now. So we're pretty excited about that. So not only can we make renewable fuels, but there's other pathways to go with our other products as well. So pretty excited about that. And then I think I just have some acknowledgements of my funding sources and everybody that's worked on the project, and I wanted to make sure that if you wanted to do a Q&A session, I hopefully can answer your questions. I'm a fast talker too.
So you're stating that you're making two different types of fuel, ethanol and biodiesel?
Yes, so you can. And a lot of the work that's coming out of the National Renewable Energy Lab right now is saying that you're going to have to do that. You're going to have to not only use your lipid fraction, but your carbohydrate fraction. And even they're working on ways to convert proteins to fuel too. So their techno-economic analysis are suggesting that you're going to have to do that to be cost effective.
You said the majority of the cost is going towards like cultivating the algae. Is this because you need like the nutrients you're paying for?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the main cost? I guess like feeding the algae.
Yeah, pretty much. The main cost is feeding the algae, and then that includes costs like people costs too, labor and all of that is included in those models. I think the CO2 is a huge source, and the nitrogen is a huge issue. Right now, phosphorus isn't so much of a cost issue, but a resource limitation issue. So there's a lot of work being done with phosphorus recycling, because you can actually reclaim the phosphorus and then cycle it back into the system. See, other costs. There's obviously a lot of capital costs associated with this in general. Yeah, but most of it is nutrients, at least 50%.
Is there any waste product when you use the wash?
Yeah, so it depends on the process. I mentioned those two processes. In the first process, if you're extracting lipids, then you get anywhere between 50 to 80% of your biomass that you're not using for fuel, assuming that you're not using carbohydrates or anything. And that actually is fed into an anaerobic digester and converted to methane gas and then some liquid waste stream. So the idea is that you would burn the methane gas for energy to run your facility on site, and then all of the rest of that is kind of, we try to recycle it. Some people have done projections where they're taking that proteinaceous fraction and doing animal feed, but the problem when you do that is the economics of it. So maybe you're getting $200 per ton for animal feed, whereas if we sent that to the plastics guy, we would get $1,100 a ton. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the waste would otherwise go to plastic, or that's
So the goal is to not have any waste in the end, but right now it really depends on your business model of like where it's going to be directed.
What if your waste goes to plastic, wouldn't that give you enough funds to help manage?
Yeah, so that's what we're working on right now. We've, especially, I think they just finished their techno-economic analysis on this project, and we would be in the green, so you would say. Yeah, but yes.
You said there's a product now being developed in China. Is there a lot of demand for it in other countries, especially developing areas like China and India?
China and India, yeah, I was just going to mention India to your question. China and India are huge right now, and they're very interested in algae. And frankly, they don't really care what you do with the biomass. They just want it to clean their air. particularly in China, they're getting a lot of pressure from their public to get their air cleaner. And so that's their motivation behind that. So I'm not 100% sure what their plan is to do with the biomass. I do know that Algix is opening a facility in China, and they are actually using all of the algae waste. So the algae pollution in all of the waterways, China has very polluted waterways, and you can go out and rake algae, that's how bad it is. So they're going to actually use the algae from that to make their plastics. And it depends on what your end product is. Some of the plastics that they make, that's fine for, if you're making a trash can, who cares, you know, versus if you're making a medical device that you're going to put in your body. So there's different levels of kind of contamination control, and so they have to do their own batches for some things, but other things they can actually use pollution. Yep.
Was there a oil price that you would say you're kind of competitive with, or maybe missed some stuff at the beginning?
So we're targeting, the DOE's target is $3 per gasoline gallon equivalent, and we're techno-economic analysis that have been run out on all of our tech to date, all of our improvements are coming out about $4.60 for the hydrothermal liquefaction pathway. So I do believe we're going to get there by their stated kind of time targets. It's just a question of getting the productivity of the algae to increase.
So you said at one time it was like, overall it was $13, but you're working your way down. Is that because of, like, you're getting better at, how are you working your way down to that price?
Yeah, so our little sidebar, we had a little sidebar earlier, and I was explaining that this algae farming is already done on a big scale right now. If you think of all the DHA and EPA, omega-3 fatty acids that are being supplemented into everything, like baby formula or your GNC pills that you're seeing on the counters these days, I think it's in milk gallons, I see it everywhere. That's actually coming mostly from algae that's being fermented in fermentation tanks by a company. And there's a lot of algae farming done as far as aquaculture goes, so you're farming algae to feed to fish, you're farming algae to get out high-value pigments and things like that. So the cost of all of these end products is really high, so you really don't care about reducing that cost too much. You can support that $13 gallon price. When you get into trying to make commodity products that are really cheap on a large scale, then you have to start worrying about the cost. So one of the very first things that they realized was that the pond liners were like $5, knocked $5 off the thing. And so because we care, we learned that and we got rid of the pond liners. Of course, that's a little more simplistic than it actually was. And then, so this is probably between that $13 and this $4.70 is a culmination of about 5 to 6 years worth of work. So incrementally, what I would love to say about the field, it's very, for anybody who's interested in getting into it, the young folk, that it's, right now it's really, really nice. It's pretty small. I would say internationally, as far as academics and industry go, we're like less than 1,000 people. And so all across the US, we're really working together instead of competing, because there's enough work to go around. It's a whole, and that's including everybody from biology all the way down to TEA, life cycle analysis, and everything in between processing wise. So it's a huge field with lots of room for expansion and for people to come in. And like I said, we collaborate with national labs, we collaborate with Arizona State, University of Kentucky. We're kind of all in it to push it forward, keep our funding going. Thank you.
Boyer, who's the district marketing manager for Unique Dining Services, and he's going to be their representative today. He describes to you what their new sustainable programs are, or what most recently what they've been doing to become more sustainable, including programming called the Green Thread program. So I think he has some cool info for you while he puts the on the screen.
All right.
I guess it's good afternoon. Thank you. As Emily said, I'm Ryan Boyer, I'm District Marketing Manager for UD Dining Services. Just a brief agenda item here, we'll go over introduction. For anybody that's not familiar with UD Dining and Aramark, the relationship between the two of them, we are actually Aramark, higher education. We do consider ourselves and promote ourselves as UD Dining on campus. But a lot of what we do is really driven by our Green Thread platform, sustainability initiatives from the corporate level within Aramark. So I'll go over a bunch of those, including what Green Thread is and the impact of that at the University of Delaware in responsible sourcing, efficient operations, and waste minimization, and then also go into some of the things that we specifically do within our operations on a day-to-day basis to kind of promote and make people aware of what we're trying to do. So again, my name is Ryan Boyer. We are joined today by Sue Bogan, our Director of Dining Services, and Robin Moore, our Senior Director of Operations. Jim Murphy's our Retail Director, and Andy Cole's our District Chef. They really do a great job in overseeing our operations and our teams that are working at the front line, making sure that we are adhering to all the different policies and procedures that are in place to make our operations efficient and to allow us to minimize our impact on the environment through those processes. So our environmental commitment is that Aramark Higher Education develops and implements various programs that we're expected to run at the operational level. A couple years back when they started really focusing on sustainability, they had it into 6 different categories, and within the past couple of years they focused it and they realized that a number of them kind of were similar in fashion, and so these became kind of the 3 focal areas and what we call Green Thread. Responsible sourcing, as far as where we're purchasing our products from or how those products are being farmed or sourced. Efficient operations in our facilities operations, lead buildings, and also even just from purchasing equipment that is more efficient or implementing policies and programs that minimize our waste as it relates to water and energy. And then waste minimization really focuses on recycling in a couple of different fashions. But we call it Green Thread because the tagline is it's woven throughout our entire process and everything that we do each and every day. So the Green Thread focus, again, these are the 3 areas. And some of the things on the right-hand side are the specific things that are implemented on a day-to-day basis at the University of Delaware within our operations. And I'll go into some of these a little bit more specifically as we go through the slides, but you can see local purchasing, sourcing sustainable seafood, within efficient operations, our green cleaning products that we utilize to clean and sanitize our operations. And then waste minimization, anything from participation in the university's single stream recycling, or the fact that all of our fryer oil on campus is recycled and converted into biodiesel. And then a few other things that we have on here. So as it relates to responsible sourcing, we get a lot of our local purchasing support through our organization and our supply chain management team. So they work directly with our providers on identifying different products that are available to us, whether it's the Monterey Bay Seafood Aquarium and their Seafood Watch program, which enables us to purchase seafood that is sustainably sourced. All the way to our providing guidance to our food providers that says we're looking to get cage-free eggs by 2020. We're currently offering cage-free shell eggs in our operations on campus, but the goal as an organization is to get to all cage-free eggs by the year 2020. I just mentioned the sustainable seafood. We do a Sustainable Fish Friday, so anybody who's been over to our new facility, the Radney Dining Fresh Food Company, every Friday at lunch, our executive chef and our culinary team over there, they identify a fish option that's available that week, and they develop a special menu item around that. We serve it on Fridays at lunch. We've been doing that since we opened last fall, and it's been considerably increasing in popularity. If you go over there now every Friday around lunchtime, there's typically a pretty decent line. If you follow us on Instagram, you'll see a lot of those photos on there because it does present itself very nicely. It's they're really delicious options that we offer those. There are a variety of different animal welfare principles that are incorporated into it. So Aramark has made a commitment to eliminating crate-free, I'm sorry, not eliminating, but going to crate-free pork and veal by the year 2017. We have not served foie gras since 2011, and we're continuing to work with those providers that we have on sourcing various animal products in a more humane way than maybe they have it in the past. And the last thing we have is our environmentally preferable disposable as it relates to a packaging service where reusable products and bulk dispensing. So a lot of times, actually, if you walk out here to the scrounge, you would see that some of the things that we're offering on our salad bar, the serviceware that we offer, and then also in our residential operations, we do offer a reusable to-go container so that we're minimizing the amount of to-go containers that are being handed out on a day-to-day basis in our residential operations. Next one was the efficient operations. I think this is kind of more of as it presents itself. Obviously, we have a lot of equipment that is already in our existing locations, but I know that especially with the new Rodney Fresh Food Company, there was a lot of care taken into by our team and the construction team to identify equipment that is both that conserves water in what we offer in our dish rooms, but also from an energy perspective in our kitchens. We actually have a hood system that can recognize heat. So if there's a grill underneath of that hood and the grill is not on, it actually reduces the energy that it's using. You turn it on, it starts to ramp up. If you throw a frozen burger onto the grill, it recognizes that there's a change in the temperature, and it actually starts to turn on the exhaust so that it can pull all the exhaust out. So that was one. There's also some things, a lot of natural light. If you've been in there, you notice that there's some skylights that are actually go up through the ground. So technically our facility is on the lower level, but we are underground in some places. So there's actually large skylights that allow some natural light to flow in. We have large walls of windows on the Academy Street side and on the side facing the Grove to minimize the amount of energy that we're using from a lighting perspective. And then green cleaning. All of our cleaners that we use, whether it's for cleaning and sanitizing our tables that everybody's eating at, or if it's the chemicals that are going into the dish machines to clean and sanitize our serviceware in those machines, all of them are considered green cleaners. Waste minimization, I think this is really probably where most people see what our initiatives are. Again, we have been a participant in the university single stream recycling program since it started, I don't know, probably 7-8 years ago at this point. We do also do fryer oil recycling, which again, I know that that's been around for at least 6 or 7 years that we've been doing that. Trayless dining was probably in 2008 or 2009, we ripped the Band-Aid off at that point and decided to go trayless. Which has a really big impact on our water conservation and energy conservation. If I remember correctly, I think it's about a third of a gallon of water per tray, of hot water I should say, is used to clean a single tray. So if you can imagine all the trays that would have been using at the time, we had 4 residential facilities and some of our retail locations offer trays as well. The amount of water that we were able to save and the amount of energy that was being saved just by the elimination of those trays. I think we got rid of somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 trays in going into the one fall semester. Food donations, we do have a partnership with the Food Bank of Delaware. They come at the end of each semester, pick up any perishables that we might have over during our close down periods. We do have a partnership with through Aramark with the Food Donation Connection, which is a third-party organization that enables us to identify local organizations that might be looking to gather food donations. We do have some opportunity for food donations, but the majority of what we have at this point in time is really geared towards our retail operations and specifically some of the pastry options that we have. I bring that up because the next bullet point at the bottom is our food management process. And I think this really is kind of one of those unknown things that people don't know about our operations and how we just operate on a day-to-day basis that really minimizes our food waste and just waste in general. So we have a very in-depth process both from the planning perspective around our projections of the amount of people we're going to be serving every single day, what products or what menu items they'll be eating, and ultimately how all of that goes through to the end where we analyze what people actually ate and what we maybe ended up discarding or would have been waste. And so what that does is, in a residential operations, that really does minimize the amount of food. I was explaining to somebody before we started, to Jen, that we get a lot of requests around this time of the year. This year, food donation is the big one. There's a perception that at the end of the night, there's this massive food that we're throwing out or we're just discarding. And I think that as I've spoken to these student groups that are working on these projects, is really explaining that waste minimization is a huge piece of what we do. I use an example of a chicken Caesar salad, and I apologize if I'm using a very bad example of your operations, but a chicken Caesar salad, if you can imagine a chicken Caesar salad all mixed together with the lettuce and the dressing and the croutons and everything else that you would put in there, if we have an amount of chicken Caesar salad that's left over at the end of the night, that does have to be discarded. But what we've done operationally is we've decided to deconstruct that type of item. We keep the lettuce separate, we keep the chicken separate, we keep everything separate, and we make things in batches. And we produce them as we need them. So if we have a lot of people coming in, we make more knowing that we're going to serve it. And as we start to slow down throughout the course of the evening, we make it in less and less batches. Ultimately, if we end up having lettuce that's been cleaned and cut, hasn't been served, we can still use that lettuce, whether it's the next meal period or if it's the next day, we can continue to use that product. And we do a lot of that in our operations and our menu planning and how we operate. So what is being seen at the end of the night is food that has been produced, it's been put out on the line, it's been served from, and we have a minimal opportunity to really save that food to be able to have it donated. So those are some of the overarching things that we do. To Jen's point, I have 20 minutes, I'm trying to keep it in here, so there's a lot of things that we could go into, but those are the big ones that we have. How does that impact us here? So all of those things are kind of our guiding policies, things that that we're expected to do at the operational level. I think where my job comes into play, working with our operations partners, is figuring out how we can take a lot of these principles and bring them to campus and make it more of a value to our students and to our customers, but also just raise awareness around them. If anybody doesn't know, Michelle Bennett, our new sustainability manager on campus, I've had numerous meetings with her now, and I think every single one of them at this point has been focused on what can we do to raise awareness. And raising awareness is our biggest opportunity. We do a farmer's market every summer that starts in June, typically runs through the end of September, offered on Mentor Circle. You can see the second picture right down here is a photograph of one of our, I think it was a crispy mahi taco that day, which was fantastic because I took that photo. Last fall, we did a farm-to-table restaurant night, which was offered in the scrounge here. So our chef actually went through our system and was able to identify various products that we offered that evening. So we were doing a local farm-to-table dinner that night. The fourth image is actually some things that we were doing last year during Earth Week to raise awareness around waste minimization, energy consumption on various things. So how much water does it take to produce 1 pound of chicken, or I forget how much water does it take to produce 1 pound of lettuce. So just awareness around these things, and people were taking guesses, and when we were taking those guesses, we were handing out some incentives. And then the last thing is some of the things that we do from a residential programming perspective. That's actually a photo of our old Rodney dining facility at the time, but we do a local garden harvest every fall semester. So again, just kind of tapping into the available options that are out there from a produce perspective and incorporating those things into our menus for a specific theme meal that we offer. We do participate in Recycle Mania. We've historically done that, I think, since 2007, I think was the first year that we participated in Recycle Mania. I just went through a lot of the sustainability programming we do. The digesters and pulpers, so the new Rodney Fresh Food Company has 2 digesters. For anybody that's not familiar, it's basically a mechanical stomach. Anything that we do from a food prep perspective, so if we're cutting off the rinds of a watermelon or cantaloupe or peppers or anything like that, we actually take all of that and we can put it into these digesters. And after 12 hours, it churns and churns and churns, and it breaks it down to a point where it actually goes out as water, brown water, not drinkable water, brown water. But obviously that minimizes our impact on what's going to the landfill. So there's very little black paper, black plastic bags of garbage that are leaving the Rodney Fresh Food Company with food waste. A lot of that is going out in that, and that also includes post-consumer waste. So when students are going, they bring back their plates that might have pizza crust or a couple of napkins and different things on it. All of that stuff is actually ending up in those digesters and going out as water. A couple of our residential operations also include pulpers, which help break the waste down before it gets sent out. And then the last thing I have on there is that we're a sustainability pilot campus for Aramark's kind of revolution of their Green Thread program. So we actually late last week, we received some new marketing collateral that we'll be having installed around campus, hopefully this week, but by the end of the month, most likely. It talks about some of the waste minimization things that we do, all the various things that we recycle. And the goal is that eventually, as we open up for fall semester, this suite of materials that help us kind of promote and make people aware of opportunities to reduce waste, that's all going to be a little bit more visible around campus with this new platform. And that's it. So, are there any questions?
Do you have a relationship with a UD farm at all? You mentioned that you try to buy locally or something. How about the UD farm? Do they produce anything? I know ice cream.
Yeah, that would be at this point the U Dairy Creamery. So we do exclusively offer U Dairy Creamery ice cream in our residential facilities, and we do also support the little pints in our retail operations. We don't get anything at this point that's being grown at the farm. I think it was a couple of years back, there was a graduate student garden that when we had the Blue and Gold Club open, that based upon the amount that we were using, that they were able to support and provide some vegetables and different things, but that was a minimal opportunity at that time.
Kind of going off of that, what is your definition of local sourcing?
So I actually asked that question. So there is no, from what I'm explained, there is no technical definition of what local is. What we need to do is actually work with Michelle and just understand this on the campus. What is the definition of local here? I know that we've historically sometimes used 500 miles of a radius, 250 miles. There could be some folks on campus that believe 50 miles is the expected radius. I think we need to understand that. I do know that as an organization, we do try to source things from within a 250-mile radius as often as possible, where we have the opportunity to make decisions on different products that are being offered on campus. We do, particularly in our retail operations, we do make a concerted effort to try to identify different local vendors or local organizations that can provide us those options. But 250 miles at this point seems to be where we're at. But there are also, some of that is also based upon what our providers do. So we order through Cisco. So Cisco's reaching out and they're sourcing their vegetables or their produce or whatever it is. If they're getting things that are from South Jersey or from Lower Delaware or wherever they might be getting it from, we're obviously, when we order those items in, we're getting items that are considered local. We don't have the amount of control on that at this point in time, but as part of this Green Thread pilot program, there is some additional materials that are coming to us, so that if we do find opportunities or different vendors that are more local, especially as it relates to produce, we have the opportunity and the information that we need to be able to go out and figure out if we can start bringing in produce or different options from that farm or from that organization.
Cisco is out of Pocono, south of Salisbury. Perhaps some of their items are local.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're not far from, they're like,
Absolutely.
They're like 2.5
We also
hours.
get things from J. Ambrogi, which is in Thoroughfare, New Jersey. It's about 20 miles up from the Delaware Memorial Bridge. They do a lot of their sourcing locally as well. I think a lot of what kind of doing this presentation is just kind of the beginning of more education and more awareness around what we're doing. I think we can be better as far as getting information from our food providers, whether it's J. Ambrogi or if it's Cisco, and being able to communicate out where these different things are. We do that with the farmers market. If anybody's been here on campus during the summer, we are going through the list of items that are available. We do typically identify where those products are coming from and identify it on a map that these are the farms that they're being purchased from. So again, it's where we have the opportunity to do it. We do take advantage of it. We now just need to figure out, as an organization, but then also if there's, with these new things, that there's opportunities for us to continue to evolve that.
So I'm interested in your digester system. We actually work with dairy farms around here, and use their anaerobic digestate liquid waste that comes out of their digesters from the cow manure, basically. How are you disposing it? Is it going to the sewer system? Okay, so it's not being recycled or anything? Because it sounds to me like it would be really nutrient rich and have a diverse micronutrient set.
I think,
It's going into the sewer system right now.
I believe it goes into some sort of holding tank below the building, and eventually it goes
That's
goes
right.
out, correct.
So you're saying you want it?
I do. Yeah, I want to say, I want
You
to.
can probably find some
I'm like,
buckets and some mugs for you.
I'm on South
We understand those are the first in the state of Delaware. They're used at the Philadelphia Convention Center on a pretty large scale, which I think is where the team had seen them in action prior to the opening. But yeah, there's two of them. There's one that's in the dish room, the main dish room, again, where all the post-consumer waste comes in. Then we do have a small commissary area back where we do a large production of some vegetables and various things for the operation. And any of the waste that goes back there or that goes back to the pot sink, that type of stuff can go into this smaller digester.
Yeah, we had to come up all the way right outside here to Pennsylvania to find the correct type of digester because the dairy farms locally didn't have them installed. Interesting.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
I saw that you use reusable carry-out containers.
Yes.
How does that program work?
Robin?
It's not working as well as we would hope it would.
So how does it work? Like, how do you get?
So if you're taking a to-go meal from Penn Cater or Rodney, as you enter, when you swipe the card, you just need to let the door checker know that you want the reusable clamshell. And the ideal is that you would fill it up just like the styrofoam with as much as you would like, as long as the lid can close. You take it to wherever. It can also go into the microwave. Your next meal that you're gonna get to go, you bring that same clamshell back and we'll give you a new one. And we will recycle or clean and put it back into the system again. So it's just a rotating cycle of the clamshell.
Okay.
So we've unsuccessfully attempted to eliminate all of the styrofoam for over 6 years. Like,
The
yeah.
challenge is that people don't like carrying around
Correct,
clamshells.
and that seems to be the
'Cause they
issue.
won't- I have a few that they wash at Gilbert, but then they leave them there. They clean them and then they just let them stack up.
Yeah, they're supposed to come back for us to reuse them again.
Yes, I know. I
Yeah.
understand that theory.
Yeah.
I got that theory. Oh, okay. Because the reusable ones, I mean, the non-reusable ones are a big headache.
Yes.
They're all over campus, on the ground and in the hallways and laying next to a trash can and in the bathrooms. They're really ugly.
I actually think it was 5 years ago, we gave every incoming freshman one, and we never see them come back.
There was no actual rise.
Yeah, each year
Very
we've tried a
minimal
new
rise in
program.
You know, it's cultural.
I've given away silverware and a reusable cup, thinking you don't have to steal the silverware or borrow the
Yeah. I
silverware.
give them as Christmas presents.
Yeah.
And my staff uses them in the lunch bells.
So-
I give every one of my staff a reusable container.
If anyone here has an idea on how we can better communicate the program, I'm all ears.
Let us know,
What if
please.
you had decentralized collection, like a recycling container, but for that, so where they don't have to carry it around or bring it back to any one building?
With the resources, anything is possible,
Yeah.
you know, but that money comes out of somewhere. And so either you're reducing some other program or you're getting more money from, you know, where money comes from, which here is a combination of students and endowment and other things. So, you know, if the students were out there demanding it, eventually we'd figure something out, I'm sure, but people don't exactly get really, really fired up over clamshells. So styrofoam maybe.
Yeah, but it takes what, 80 years to get rid of that little piece of white foam?
Oh, styrofoam, it depends. It can go a lot longer than that. I
Pretty
mean,
ugly.
ideally, maybe 80 years.
Well, I was curious. My other question is about the digester. If the students don't return any food, then the digester doesn't have a whole lot in it. So somehow, if you could get them to clean their plate before they brought you back a clean plate, there wouldn't be any.
That's the idea, actually. Part of this green thread rebranding thing that I mentioned is actually window clings that the message is only take what you plan to eat.
Right.
I actually just tweeted about this past weekend.
Yeah.
Somebody actually tweeted us about that on Friday night.
There's quite a few institutions across the country that have different programs that most of them refer to like as Clean Plate, but there's a bunch of different titles, and that they just basically take what you want, come back, or leave a clean plate. There's all sorts of little.
I know at my house
slogans.
it's smaller plates.
I think the first kind of step of that was the trailers dining. I think that was kind of, you have people that do less of the grazing where they would have plates upon plates upon plates and just gathering things, and then eventually taking back stuff that they didn't eat. Now there's more of a thought process around going up and actually getting a plate, taking it back to the seat and eating it. So I think that minimizes that to some extent, but I think there is just, again, the awareness around thinking about, are you actually going to eat something if you take it, and kind of getting that communication out there.
Yeah, because there was even one institution that combined it with wellness, that, take what you want or take what you need. They made it real clear that you don't have to overeat, but most of them were just the clean plate. If you return a clean plate, then you're not wasting anything.
Yeah, we have a lot of student groups that we're kind of funneling into waste areas to do kind of outreach and communication among other students. Because we can put out signs and flyers and tweet and talk about it, but we don't have the reach that other students have. So I mean, we can shout everything out, but that doesn't mean all the students are hearing it. So I've got about half a dozen different student groups or organizations just trying to get some waste engagement and information out there, whether it's recycling, and certainly not without a food waste component. I know I've talked to a few different student groups just recently, like in the past week, about food waste. So it's definitely a hot button issue, but our outreach is only as good as the audience we can reach and get a hold of. So I'm trying to leverage students on that, because I feel like they're gonna
Be the peers that convince the other peers.
that, and just like the language and the methods. I am not a social media guru. I don't even know if that is an effective method. Everyone's like, oh, get on the internet. And I'm like, well, students aren't necessarily on the internet to get my message,
There's a lot of competition. What about using the dining halls themselves as a venue for, I don't know how you do it, but just different ways of getting that information out there? You got a captive audience, they got to eat.
We've done a few different things in the past. There are campaigns called Way to Waste, where you kind of do an unannounced day where you take all the post-consumer waste that's coming back to the dish room, and you put it in bags and you scale it, and you weigh it and you see what it is, and then you do the same thing, and that you kind of promote and say, hey, we're weighing the waste, and you have, to Michelle's point, you have some of the students that might be out there kind of collecting and talking about what you're doing, and then you do the weigh, you weigh it again, and you would hypothetically see a difference in the people having an awareness around how much they're wasting. I think they're good tools. I don't know, realistically, there's a lot of different factors that could go into, what would be impacting the weight of one day versus another day, but I think it's just more the awareness around it.
Right.
And so those are just things that we can continue to look for those types of opportunities to get that out there, and those have been topics that, my part of my
I'm not
discussion with
thinking
Michelle.
about big projects, but almost like visual bullets, targets that people would see that would make them think of something.
Yeah, I mean, we can always improve signage and things around. You always run the risk that your signage just becomes a background,
Right. There's got to be a balance, and
So,
at different times, not always there, but pops.
We'll be taking a look. I'll be taking a look over the course of the summer, and Michelle and I are going to be meeting probably on a monthly basis at this point to just kind of think about what opportunities we have, whether it's recycling or waste minimization. What are different opportunities that we have, as we go through each of the semesters, and even just in preparation for opening up for fall, whether it's a specific piece of signage that we think would resonate with students and really make them think, or if it's something that's more of an engagement strategy that we use my intern team for, or if it is more of a full-blown, effort or whatever the combination of those different things are, but it's definitely on the list of things to, again, just continue to raise the awareness of, because it's not that,
It's hard. So much out
there's a lot of things that are already being done, it's just a matter of, again, what's the most effective manner in which it's gonna impact people and not just be something that you do and then nobody participates, which is unfortunately what we saw with the clamshell program.
That's a shame. That's sad.
It is. I mean, I think what it comes down to is, again, it's a convenience thing. I mean, I can honestly tell you that a lot of what we do and a lot of what the feedback we get as it relates to different programs is a lot of times centered around the convenience factor. And so when you think about the fact that somebody, if they're going to be going to class and they're leaving their room and they're not going to go back to their room before they go to lunch, the reality is that are they going to stick a dirty clamshell in the back of their bag at this point in time? And so, what is it, or how can we, kind of communicate that kind of message to get that program up and running a little bit better than it has been historically?
Have you guys talked to maybe the RAs on campus or the RA training team to get them, because basically a lot of people that go to the dining halls are mostly students that live on campus. So if you can get your RAs to maybe teach them about these programs and like how the clamshell works, that might make students more aware of using it.
That's an area where we can improve coordination and one reason they created my position and hired someone into it, fortunately it was me, was that they needed somebody to coordinate this stuff. Because it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to get all the ducks in a row. Here's one duck and here's one duck. And these are all folk, if you have, I like to tell people if you have a full-time job, you really have two. So time really is one of the tightest resources when it comes to getting all these different departments working together. And keep in mind, with universities, you have traditional silos where people are kind of like, oh, it never occurred to me to reach outside of my, So a big part of my job is doing that. So, I have connections in Res Life where, when I was talking about funneling students into kind of a waste outreach focus, the whole point of doing that is to ramp up in the fall and then next spring do a big Recycle Mania and make it like actually a real big event. Hopefully most people just kind of notice on campus. God forbid they actually get involved and engaged. And that's going to include Res Life. It'll include coordinating with dining, with a bunch of student groups, and frankly as many different people as I can. If I can get professors talking about it, oh my God, like that would just make my year. So what we're going to do is coordinate all that up into the fall. And right now we're just kind of gearing up. So we're getting people involved, connected, so they can form the relationships they want. They can figure their stuff out. Starting this far ahead is great because these, Student Government Association, all these other groups can kind of get started, figure out what it really entails. And then by the time the fall comes around, be like, okay guys, like get out there and start talking about recycling, food waste, whatever. All these different groups have different focuses based on their interest. So I can't control what they come to me with their interest as, but I can say, hey, did you know a bunch of other people are talking about a similar issue? So some of them want to get rid of the plastic. Some of them want to reduce food waste. Some of them want to improve recycling and put recycle cans everywhere. So we're just kind of coordinating that interest and that focus. RAs are going to be a big part of it. Usually with the RAs, the biggest bang is that kind of first week or two of class when you guys have like a bajillion meetings and we throw all the information at you and hope some of it sticks. We can coordinate with Res Life to see if we can't incorporate like little refreshers or something on these issues that affect people on campus every day. So we're coordinating with them, but right now during the school year, they don't have time for me. I mean, they're willing to sit down and talk with me, but they don't have time to like redo their entire program. So after semester and everyone moves out, I'll follow back around with them and say, hey, can we add like this or improve on whatever you guys have in your system right now? And then when RA training comes in the summer, hopefully maybe I'll get in front of them and, I don't know, dance around, do something crazy to get their attention, and then hopefully like try and make the case that it's something they should be hammering as frequently as they can in the dorms.
And I think for us, it also starts with us for NSO, obviously getting the freshmen when they're first coming in and kind of explaining and having them understand the things that are available So what again is the vehicle that we use to communicate that? And obviously during NSO, there's a lot that they have going on that day. So you might get a fragment of time and their memory of what you have, but it's more of just kind of preparing then obviously for the fall and what do we do to continue to kind of keep that message going out the first few weeks of the semester, whether it's in the locations or through social media or our website or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, we'd hit them during orientation and during that kind of freshman, like getting to know the campus-y situation, but then that would just be a primer. That wouldn't even be the core message. And then after they get settled in, they are going to class and stuff, we would have events, programming, whatever, to reinforce it, you know, at least another time during the semester, maybe 2 or 3 times through different events. Some of them not even sustainability themed, you know. But that's in an ideal world where I have staff and resources where these guys have staffs and resources to do that. So it's tough. It's tough. Time really is one of the shortest resources on campus.
Anything else? No? All right. Thank you.
And which course will start back again in the fall.
I have not been able to get down there yet. I'd love to.
Again, if you haven't signed in, please do so, and there's some cups left. And then also on behalf of another speaker we had last year, Stephanie Herons, who's from the Sierra Club, this is also mentioning waste. I just wanted to let you know about an event she's having this weekend, if you're interested, just to keep up with our past speakers. She's doing a campaign against plastic bags. So if you are interested in helping her tell the world how bad plastic bags are, and she's going to try to make the largest plastic bag ball in the world or something, a Guinness World Record. So you can learn more about that on her Delaware Sierra Club website. But I just wanted to keep going with our other speakers. But thank you all so much for coming, and our speakers and everyone. And have a great day.